Welcome to another episode of Croc Talk TV. I'm your host, former AFL defensive back, Eric Crocker. I'm laughing because I'm already reading the comments. I see my boy Eric Rogers in here. He said, "You want to be LeBron?" Of course, Eric. Who wouldn't want to be LeBron? That's where I got that from. So I actually wanted to, I was never like a big time recruit or anything like that. So I wanted to make it like, I'm picking hats or something and put my hat on and like, this is the podcast I'm joining. Let's go. Yeah. See the comments, Michael. Here we go. I haven't been this hyped since KD chose Golden State in 2016. That's funny, man. You guys are awesome. My dog, Eric. Eric, how's that ACL going? It's been a few years, but I feel like, I don't know. Sometimes those things kind of linger. I'll let some people, filter in and whatnot. I already guessed right, but I'll watch. Show some love. Yeah, so really Croc hosting the Golden State Warriors podcast. Nah, that ain't happening. I won't be hosting no kind of basketball. I don't know if you guys have ever basketball Twitter. There's some angry people, man. Like these people are like angry. You know what I'm saying? Like if you tweet something about basketball and don't be like kind of wrong or whatever, because basketball Twitter, they'll come at you. And they've come at me a ton. And there's some angry people. I feel like basketball Twitter is unhappy. That's what I think. So I'm gonna let some people filter in. The big announcement will come in about 5 minutes. I'm laughing because I hope nobody's taking me serious with this. I hope y'all not taking me serious. And when I say taking me serious, I mean like I'm just having fun with it, man. I'm just having fun. Thought this would be a cool way to kind of involve everybody in on this. And, I appreciate everybody that has, supported me through my podcasting journey. It continues. Really want to say shout out to Blue Wire. Shout out to my guy, Rob. They've been awesome. Kevin was amazing. And Kevin Jones, he's the founder of Blue Wire. So Blue Wire, I was with Blue Wire in its like infant stages. And I tweeted this out, but I was with Blue Wire in like the infant stages of Blue Wire where like, I mean, it like the first paychecks, I think maybe like there were some paychecks that were like $30 for like, I was at the very beginning, and definitely Blue Wire has grown into something that is really big time now. Kevin Jones worked really hard. He actually has a story where he talked about it on a podcast, really just talking about Blue Wire and everything that kind of went into putting it together and how he was working like multiple jobs, but still investing all of his money into Blue Wire pods. And I thought that was really like admirable. So shout out to Blue Wire. You know what I'm saying? Yes, sir. Drip Wire. Listen, hey, Drip Wire, it really needs to be something where just people just talk about different drip. We'll have somebody that's over football, probably me. We'll have somebody over basketball, baseball. I think if we're just talking just purely drip, I think baseball players got the most drip. Like I'd say baseball players, man. Croc is late to his own party. Shout out from New Orleans. See, I know how to say New Orleans. I had some teammates. I can tell anybody from New Orleans just how they speak. I had a bunch of teammates, and their Southern accent is completely different than especially Arkansas accent and Memphis accents. It's all different, which is kind of crazy because coming from California, you should think everybody from the South sounds the same. Like, oh, this person is just country or whatever. But there's different country accents, which I never knew. LeBron didn't take this long. Eric, really, I feel like LeBron did take this long. I think LeBron, didn't he kind of like sit there and talk to some kids or something? He had the kids going. Then he was just like, he kind of milked it out. Then he finally was like, okay. And then he finally did it. But this is going to be fun because I'm joining the 49ers podcast, and I know a lot of people know this guy. So, you know what? We got enough people in here. I appreciate everybody coming in here, just having fun with me on this. Didn't take Brown an hour. Yeah, didn't Brown take an hour? That's what I'm talking about, DP. It took Brown an hour, right? It took heck long. Like he was there with the kids and everything. But anyways, we're gonna get going. So here we go. I'm bringing my guy on right now. Are you ready? Give me the thumbs up if you're ready. All right, here we go. And boom.
Yeah, what's up, Croc?
What's up? So,
dude, I thought you were going to take this decision a lot longer. I was waiting for you to bring some kids out and stuff.
Yeah, well, they're all busy right now. It's kind of late, but I actually thought about doing that. For those of you who don't know, this is my guy, Brian Peacock. Brian Peacock is the host of Locked On 49ers, the most successful podcast on the Locked On program, right? Or at least top 3.
Yeah, it's up there. I battle with some of the other Locked On hosts. It's been an amazing run. You talked about your run with Striking Gold and Blue Wire Pods, and it's been similar with Locked On and how big things have been with Locked On. And Locked On 49ers has grown so much, and I love having you on. In fact, Croc, correct me if I'm wrong here. Was I not like this is like, and we both geek out on scouting stuff in the NFL draft, right? And this is how good of a scout I am. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was the first person to ask you on a podcast, right?
You were
very first podcast appearance on Locked On 49ers back in the day.
That was like years ago too. Yeah,
that was like 2017, 2018, maybe 2017, probably. Right?
2017, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was like, or no, maybe 2018, somewhere around there. But it was some years ago. It was the first one, and we were talking about defensive backs from the Senior Bowl, and we kind of got into it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what you were the DB guy, and you still are the DB guy. You're the DB guy, the wide receiver guy, you're the 49ers guy. And I just respect the heck out of what you're doing, man. You've been killing it. I love your breakdowns. I love the way you break it down in a way that people understand. And I was looking for someone to bring on, and essentially it was like, look, we went through this whole thing with the 49ers for a month, and they traded up to number 3, and we're like, who are they going to take? Who are they going to take? Who are they going to take? And for me, it was like, dude, I don't know if number 3, I don't think Crocker would have been there. I had to go up to number 1. Like, you know what I mean? Kind of a move, go up and get Eric Crocker, because you were the only guy I wanted to come join me on the podcast daily, as we do on the Locked On Podcast Network. And for those of you who don't know about Locked On 49ers, I am Brian Peacock. I'm the host of Locked On 49ers. Our thing is we do it daily. So 5 days a week, 49ers content coming at you. Every team is covered on the Locked On Podcast Network. So if you're joining this and you're not a 49ers fan and you're just here for Croc, your team is covered on the Locked On Podcast Network. And I've been doing it solo, having a lot of guests. I like to have Crocker on too. And I thought, you know what, now's the time. I want to bring on a permanent co-host. So Eric Crocker is going to be joining me every day now on the pod. And one of the big things too is we're going to be having so the parent company that owns Locked On now is a TV company, and they're rolling out YouTube channels for all the podcasts. And so it's going slowly, a couple per week and stuff, but we're going to be live on YouTube as well doing this podcast. And I was like, man, you don't want to be looking at my mug 30 minutes every day and that's it. Like, I need somebody else. I need to pretty up the podcast a little bit. It's got to be Crocker. Right? You guys talking about the drip before I jumped on here. So Croc was like the only guy I thought of when I was like, okay, I need someone to come with me daily on the podcast. And luckily it worked out. And I'm so excited to announce that Eric Crocker is now going to be my permanent co-host on Locked On 49ers. So, Croc, I appreciate you, man, and thank you so much for joining me on this thing. And I can't wait to be talking 49ers with you daily on Locked On 49ers.
Look, we already got a hashtag, Locked On P-Croc.
Oh, P-Croc, I like that. Yeah, Locked On Crocky, for sure.
Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah, so there are some questions in here. I had some questions about leaving Blue Wire. Yes, I left Blue Wire. But I had a great time there. Great people. Kevin was amazing. I had a good conversation with Kevin about it. And he was excited for me. Rob wasn't too excited in the sense of, just me leaving. And Rob, he's been my best friend, throughout this, and we've grown to be pretty much family. I mean, Rob and I, we have conversations about things from football to Michael Myers to, talking about
Michael
everything,
Myers,
our TV shows.
Michael Myers, the comedian, or Michael Myers,
Michael Myers.
Murderer? Okay, yeah, okay, the horror movie guy.
Yeah. So that's been doing.
I want to shout out Rob do if I can, because I love Rob and I've had him on Locked On 49ers too. He's such a great dude. And I felt a little bit bad, kind of working in there and stealing you away from that podcast. And Rob, if you're out there and you're watching, open invitation for you to come on and chat with us. And we're going to be having roundtables on Locked On 49ers. And that's one of the things I want to do today here, because this is also a crossover podcast. So for those of you listening to Locked On 49ers right now, this is the Locked On 49ers podcast, but we're also live on Croc Talk TV. So a little bit of a crossover here. So shout out to everybody who's watching live on video. But Eric Crocker joining me here on Locked On 49ers now for the foreseeable future. And we're going to be doing roundtables. And one of the things I want to talk about today is just the future of Locked On 49ers, the direction that's going, maybe take some questions from the folks out there. And I see a ton of people here in the chat. And then Croc, for you to talk about the direction that you're taking Croc Talk as well.
Yeah, so Croc Talk, what I really wanted this to be, and it's kind of turned into something a little different, but a wide receiver and defensive back based podcast, YouTube, where I just bring all things receiver, defensive back content from, a technical standpoint, or just my thoughts on receivers and DBs around the league, breaking guys down. Obviously, I'll incorporate, draft prospects and things like that. But Croc Talk TV is really going to be something that's more so of purely receiver, defensive back, and all my 49er content will be on Locked On 49ers. And I mean, we got to have content every day. So I'm pretty sure I'll have plenty to talk about the 49ers. I don't want to run out of things to talk about.
You'll be exhausted talking about the 49ers with me every day on Locked On 49ers. And it's funny because I know the problem that you run into, because you're a 49ers fan and you're steeped at 49ers Twitter. And I know you get a lot of questions when you're doing the Croc Talk stuff about 49ers specific stuff. And I know you want to cover the entire league when it comes to DBs and wide receivers and whatever's going on in the NFL. And I run into the same thing because I not only host the Locked On 49ers podcast, co-host it now with Eric Crocker, but I also host the Peacock and Williamson NFL show, talking about the entire league daily with Matt Williamson, who is former ESPN guy, former college and pro scout. And we talk about the entire NFL, but I get so many questions when we do a Twitter Tuesday or something like that about the 49ers. And so it's hard not to talk Niners on that podcast just because I have so many followers that want to talk about the 49ers. And for Williamson, he does Steelers radio and he's in Pittsburgh. So he gets a ton of Pittsburgh Steelers questions. And so when we do our mailbag shows, we have to filter through and say, okay, we can't talk 49ers. We can't talk Steelers. We got to find the other 30 teams in the NFL to talk about and go for those questions first. So if you ever hit me up and on the Peacock and Williamson show and want to talk 49ers, if I ignored your question, it's because I'll probably talk about it on Locked On 49ers, and I'm trying to cover the rest of the league on the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. And so, Crocker, I know you've run into some of those things too, because you get a bunch of 49ers fans in the chat and they want to talk Niners with you, right?
Yeah, I'd say about 90% of my subscribers are probably, 49er fans. And I can definitely see, when I look at the views on videos that I post. I remember, having like this nice little conversation I had with YouTube on JC Horn, and it was like 300 views. I mean, it's kind of crept up to like 900 views by now. It was about almost a month ago now. But if I talk about Trey Lance, it can get like 10,000 views. So it's very clear where a bulk of my subscribers are coming from. But I hope that they, not only enjoy my thoughts and analysis on 49er players, but also on players around the league, and just kind of, the more they know, they're able to kind of be informed, especially with the prospects and everything that's coming out, because at least those guys have a chance to become a 49er. So I hope everybody still enjoys that as I push that a little bit more.
Oh, and I love it. I eat up all of your content, and I love when you're talking about any of the prospects that are coming up in the draft. I love when you're breaking down pro players, and because I learned so much from you, and that's what I love, and that's why I wanted to bring you onto Locked On 49ers, was just your knowledge and how good you are at getting that knowledge across in a simple and understandable way. And I'm sure you're going to be doing a ton of like video and film work, right, on Croc Talk and Croc Talk TV. And Croc Talk started out as Croc Talk TV on YouTube, but you've got the podcast as well, right?
Yeah, I've just turned it to where I just took the audio, boom, posted it to, Spotify, and it's supposed to go out to everything. It hasn't got approved yet by Apple Pods, but I guess that takes a little
Apple's
while.
having some problems, by the way. If anybody out there is wondering what's going on with Apple and maybe your favorite podcast, whether it's Locked On 49ers or Croc Talk or whatever podcast you listen to, Apple's been having some big problems recently. And I think they did an update with their app, and podcasts aren't getting delivered. So I don't know if Apple's where you want to start right now. If you're looking for podcast and a podcast feed, Apple has been dropping the ball a little bit. So if you're missing some podcasts on Apple, maybe go check out Spotify or one of the other podcast apps, at least for the short term until they figure that out. So I don't know what's going on with Apple, but they're having some problems right now. So I just wanted to put that out there, and maybe that's why Croc Talk's not showing up on Apple yet. But it always takes a little bit longer to get on Apple than it does to get on the rest of the platforms.
Well, yeah, hopefully it is just an issue with them, because it's been dispersed out to, like, I don't know, there's way more streaming sites than I knew. But when you go on Anchor, Anchor just disperses it out to every streaming site, which there's like 10 of them. And Apple Podcasts is like the last one to join the party with that. So I'm like, come on, man. That's the main one. Everybody has iPhones.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is the main one, and that's the most popular one too. So it did hurt a little bit to see that Apple dropped the ball, and some of my colleagues were hurt much more than I was. I kind of skated through, and I don't think I missed too many podcasts from some folks, but that might be part of the reason why you're not seeing Croc Talk yet on Apple Podcasts. I don't know. I don't know what your vision for Locked On 49ers is jumping on with me, but I know that one of the things I want to do with Locked On 49ers is just get deeper into everything. And if you're just tuning in, Eric Crocker joining me on Locked On 49ers now as a permanent co-host. And obviously we're going to get deep into everything. I'm going to use Crocker's knowledge, and I'm going to keep working hard to get smarter about ball and cover the team as best I can. But I mean, we've got a ton of content coming because this is the dead season, right? In June, we get 6 weeks after mandatory minicamp until training camp starts. So we're going to talk about the roster. We're going to talk about the depth chart. We're going to break down position by position, the best camp battles that are coming up. We're going to go back to the film and look at some players. There's a June 1st deadline coming up that I think there's some potential for some 49ers to add some potential firepower too. So we're going to cover all of those things. We're going to cover everything there is to cover when it comes to the 49ers and Locked On 49ers. I'm so excited for Crocker to join me there. I'm just if nothing else, I just want everyone to know how excited I am that to chat with Croc every day, and that when we do go live on YouTube on Locked On 49ers as well, that you don't have to just stare at my mug. You get to look at Crocker's well-groomed mug and his tattoos and his. To be honest, Croc, I'm missing the old long hair you used to have, because I see those old like Saber Cats, and I see the old clips of you with like the long hair. And I don't even know if you could bring that back, but that was an amazing look. I got to say, like, you had like, because you always talk about everybody's uniforms. Like, you talk about everybody's swag on the field, and like, oh, this guy's got the wrong shoes, and it's something I would never even notice. Like, what are you talking about? Why are those shoes wrong? Now he's got to go black shoes and not white shoes with this, and the socks are wrong. And I'm like, what? But then when I see you back and see photos from your playing days, I was like, okay, I get it. Like, you feel good, you play good, right?
Right. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. I felt good sometimes and still didn't play good, but I mean, that was just, I feel like the swag or the drip, like that whole thing, a lot of times it's something like you either have or you don't. Like, some people are kind of born with just the ability to put on a uniform a certain way. And I was one of those people that just knew how to put a uniform on. There are some people that because there's a lot of stuff that I put on. Like, I wasn't trying, like, I didn't have to try. It just kind of came across as like, you know, there's some pictures I could post, and it's like all I had on was wrist tape and a visor, but just the way that, you know, my gloves, the way my pants were above my knees, like just the way you put things on, it could look drastically different. And you look at guys like, you know, Jimmy Garoppolo, right? He was fairly simple. He had his own little swag. Well, if you look at Nick Mullins, they really had the same thing on, but Garoppolo just understood how to wear it better. And it's one of those things, you just know how to put it on better. And I mean, like, Mullins, it was just like, oh man, it looks so terrible. But they really had the same thing on. It's just the way some guys put things on. So I knew how to put things on very well. And I watch guys, and just certain things just jump out to me. I'm just like, oh, why do you do this? Or why do you do that? Like, it pains me, and I can't help but see it, and I actually hate myself for that because I'm just constantly judging guys when I should just be watching them play football.
You can look faster because of what you're wearing, but you can't once you see the play and once people are in motion, then that goes away. But you can see guys standing still. Yeah, like, that guy looks fast. And I think a lot of it is how they're put together, like how their body is shaped and biomechanics, and then and what they're wearing as well. And then they start to play, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. So the first time I ever noticed anything like that, and we're getting way off the rails here, but that's okay, whatever. And we're gonna take some questions here too, and I see so many people in the chat, and I'm seeing a bunch blowing up on Twitter as well. Shout out to everybody out there. But Deion was the first, and the one thing I wanted to ask, if I could interview Deion Sanders right now, above going against Jerry Rice in practice, above any other question, ask him if his neck sweatband was actually functional or purely for looks. What do you think? Did you ever rock the neckband?
Oh, 100%. Maybe after we get off here, I'll post a picture of me from ninth grade with the purple headband around my neck. I mean, it was. I definitely don't think it served any type of purpose other than you just look good. But I think there's one person that people don't really look at. But if you kind of go back, and this guy started playing before Deion Sanders. If you go back, you'll notice that this guy put his uniform on a very specific way. He wore his wristbands a certain way. He'd wear like a red one here, a black one here, and then flip-flop the colors here. His gloves were a certain color. His towel was like very specific. And nobody really notices this. But Jerry Rice, he actually, he's before Deion Sanders, if you go back and look at some early pictures of Jerry Rice, he definitely was very particular with how he put his uniform on. And it kind of goes over a lot of people. They don't notice it. But, Deion Sanders was just louder with just the way that he was. And, the draft day, talking about they're going to have to put him on layaway. And he had all the gold chains and the Jerry curl and the shades. But Jerry Rice, he was someone, too, who really, you could tell he cared about how he put his uniform on.
Yeah, I remember hearing Brent Jones talk on KNBR about Jerry Rice and young, like very young rookie Jerry Rice. And there was some diva qualities to Jerry Rice. And remember, he was flat. I think he had his own towel that was hanging off his belt that said Flash 80 on it too. So
wow.
Yeah. And it was like, and Deion had like the Jerry curl thing going on too, which was somewhat unfortunate, but I loved the look for then too, but yeah, Jerry, I think people are sleeping on Jerry actually for his swag. Yeah, no, that's a great call. And that
as he got older, it got to be very, very basic. It was still very specific, but it just ended up being very, very basic, which basic can be good, but he just looked a little bit more of like an old man version of what he once was.
Actually, that reminds me, Brent Jones' nickname, or I don't know if it was Brent Jones came up with the nickname or somebody else with the 49ers, but his nickname was Fifi.
Why?
I don't know, because he was like a fancy boy. Like Fifi was their nickname for Jerry Rice way back in the day. But Jerry Rice also, end of career Jerry Rice, Seahawks Jerry Rice with the cornrows, but he had this receding hairline.
In the bald spot.
Sorry, Jerry, but that was one of the worst looks ever. It was one of you can't have cornrows that start in like the middle of your head back here. You can't.
And there was a bald spot, so he had like the braids kind of go over the bald spot. It wasn't a good look.
He's trying to fool people with the braids to cover up the bald spot, probably, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes when you see something like that, where it's like that person should not be doing that, I always think that they either have no friends or they have bad friends, because somebody's supposed to tell you that that's not a good look. Like I would want all my friends to tell me like, like you talked about my dreads, right? And me having the dreads and everything, and I let go of my dreads because I used to see Floyd Mayweather's dad who had dreads, but he was bald all right here, and then he just had dreads in the back. And I was like, if I ever start to go bald, I'm gonna cut my dreads off. And the moment I noticed that it was going, I went bald. So there's no more dreads.
The Hulk Hogan thing, right? Because he only had like curtains in the back, and he would wear the do-rag, and then you couldn't tell. Then he would go wrestle and take off the do-rag, and it was completely bald except for like the hair hanging off in the back. And it looked really bad without the do-rag, and that's a That's a similar vibe there. That's so funny. I love it. I love it. Should we take some questions from the folks to wrap up this crossover pod? And I think we're going to go much longer live on the Croc Talk TV than we're going to go on the actual Locked On 49ers portion of the crossover podcasts here. But I think there's a ton of questions that I'm seeing that people are asking about, and one of them was about Winkler and my guy Nick Winkler and Winky Wednesdays. I want to address that question. And no, nothing's changing with Winkler. Winky Wednesdays is still going to happen at Locked On 49ers. Nick Winkler is going to join us. It's just going to be an extra person with Crocker, and we're all going to chat about the 49ers Wednesdays as we always did before. And we'll probably add some other days and some other roundtables with other 49ers beat writers, other podcasters, whoever, and have some roundtables and keep that conversation going. And listeners too, jump on Locker Room or whatever. Like, it's all wide open, and I love more voices and more ideas on Locked On 49ers is what this is all about.
Yeah, one thing, and people probably don't know this, but a few years ago, we all met up at a spot in San Francisco, and we watched the draft live with each other. Nick Winkler was there, so I met Nicky, and obviously Brian. I mean, that was the first time that you and I met.
Dylan, he disappeared from 49ers Twitter, by the way. I haven't talked to that guy in forever.
Dylan disappeared from the face of the earth. I actually feel like, it's time to kind of reach out to him and just ask him how he's doing, because he was the one guy that kind of got me involved in all this, with the writing about the 49ers and about prospects and stuff like that. Like, that was something that I was not interested in at all. And he kind of showed me a vision of how he wanted to build 4th and 9, and he wanted me to be a pivotal, part of that. And as it started growing, I think his life got busier with his job, and I know he was doing very well with that. And before you know it, just boom, gone. There was no more 4th and 9 at all. Like, there's no signs of it.
I know. Shout out to Dylan if you're listening. What's up? I hope you're doing well. He got a new job, and I know that took a lot of his time, so I think that's part of it as well. But that was a fun draft. That was the 2018 draft, I believe it was, and we did a live at the bar in San Francisco. And we did a live stream. That was the first ever time I did a live stream. That was with you and Dylan, and Wink was there, and we were breaking down the draft as it happened. We were completely shocked about Mike McGlinchey was the first round. We're like, what? Mike McGlinchey? What's going on with that? And then all of a sudden overnight, and it was a 2-day thing. So the next day we came back and did it again for round 2 and round 3. But it was like, why McGlinchey? That blew us all away. And then Trent Brown got traded overnight, and they're like, okay, well, now that makes sense. I get it. It doesn't fit the offense, and they're going in a new direction there at offensive tackle. So now that was super fun. And next year we should do it again. Let's go live drafting again. Although the 49ers don't have a first round pick next year, so that might be less fun to do the first round at Locked On 49ers without the 49ers picking in day 1.
Well, I see a comment there, and someone said, I heard today that Jeremy Fowler from ESPN says the 49ers are a team to watch for Julio Jones. And if they are, I would assume that if they somehow make it happen, they probably will be without a first and a second round pick, because I think it's going to cost at least a second to get them.
They won't be picking until the 90s probably next year in the 2022 draft. Also, I don't know, Jeremy Fowler going out on a limb there. Oh, you think the 49ers might be involved in Julio Jones? I don't know if that report is anything even worth reporting, because I think we all assume the 49ers would at least check in on that, and Kyle Shanahan would be interested. So I don't know if the 49ers being a team to watch for Julio Jones is any sort of a report. But what's interesting to me is the reports we've seen recently with other NFC West teams, the Rams and the Seahawks specifically. And then I heard there was a report, I think it was from Diana Rossini, and that the Falcons had received an offer for a first-round pick for Julio Jones. And my response to all of that is, it sounds like, and that would lead to, that would give some credence to the 49ers being involved, because I think the Falcons are floating that. If the Falcons got a first-round offer for Julio Jones, he wouldn't be a Falcon right now. They would have accepted that in a heartbeat, right? Because I don't know if they're going to get a first rounder. And if you're the 49ers, the Rams don't have a first rounder next year either. So if the Rams outbid the 49ers and neither team has a first rounder, I think a lot of this is coming from the Falcons trying to up the 49ers offer potentially for Julio Jones. What do you think about that, Croc?
Well, Seahawks don't have a first round pick either. So nobody in the NFC West has first round picks. So, if it's any of those two teams, you definitely can't get outbid by a team that's in the same situation as you.
everybody's all in for it. And the 49ers, I would think, would have the bigger need for Julio Jones and more familiar with Julio Jones. And it would make more sense than both the Seahawks. I don't know what the Seahawks report is really the thing where I was like, okay, because the Rams are in on everybody. They're like the ultimate stars and scrubs, like really extreme stars and scrubs roster. And that would make perfect sense that they're going to be in on everybody who's, a big name player, and they're trying to win now. And then they're trying to filter in very cheap draft picks and other players to fill out the rest of their roster with star power. That's just organizational philosophy. The Seahawks aren't like that. And when I see reports about the Seahawks, like, well, they got DK, they got who's the other wide receiver there?
Lockett. So they got Tyler Lockett, and they also just drafted the kid from Western Michigan, or the receiver. He's a speedster.
The Rams drafted Tutu, right?
Yeah, they drafted Tutu, but and I can see him in my head. I can see him, the kid from Western Michigan, the speedster.
Oh gosh, dang it! Yeah, no, you're right, and I'm blanking on it right now.
They all drafted speedsters though. The Cardinals drafted Rondale Moore. Tutu was drafted by the Rams, and the Seahawks.
Dwayne Eskridge. That's it. Thank you.
Dwayne Eskridge. Yes.
In the chat.
So I mean, but one thing, I mean, they were talking about Russell Wilson actually calling and having conversations with Julio Jones to try to get him over there.
That's the thing. I think we know by now that, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Aaron Rodgers. It doesn't matter if you're Russell Wilson. It doesn't matter if you're a future Hall of Famer. You're not the GM. You're not in charge. Like, Russell Wilson can have all the conversations with Julio Jones he wants. That doesn't matter. It's all about Schneider, and it's all about Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll saw half a season of Russell Wilson cooking and then shut that down in the second half of the year, right? So why would he want to add Julio Jones to what he already has? Like, that one doesn't make sense. I get the Rams, the Seahawks report. When I saw that, I thought, you know what? I'm not buying this. I think the Falcons are fishing for better offers because they want that first round pick, but they don't actually have it.
Yeah, and that was kind of one of my initial thoughts too. But I know you talked about them having the trade already accepted, but they can't do anything until the first. So
right, yeah, and that's why I'm glad we get a chance to talk about this today, because we only have maybe 2 days left to talk about this before he actually gets traded somewhere, and we can't talk about Julio Jones anymore. Someone asked about my shirt. Yeah, this is the I Survived the 2021 NFL Draft shirt. I just got this yesterday from Breaking Tea. I believe Matt Mayoko and the NBC Sports crew had something to do with the shirt. Let me bring down my camera here if I can.
Oh yeah. It was tough. I was just talking to somebody about this, but there were a few people I was really surprised to see on edge. You were one of them, because I'm like, Brian Peacock is always even kill. Like, you're always even kill. There was Chris Biederman, and there was one more guy, even Rob Lauder, who's very, even. All three of you guys where I'm like, no, and once I saw you guys kind of like, I don't want to say upset, but your guys' tone was changing. I was like, yeah, there's no way. If these three guys are thinking like that, and the rest of 49er fan base, for the most part, I'd say 90% were upset about that, the news that was coming out and the media pushing a certain narrative, I was like, it can't be true.
It was the wildest thing ever. And the big part for me that was so strange was Mac Jones at 3 never made any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
But it fit the Kyle Shanahan narrative enough that you could believe it. And that's where things went crazy, because like the whole time was like, no way. And talking on the Peacock and Williamson podcast with Matt Williamson, and he's like, hey, Peacock, I think your head's in the sand here. Everything points to Mac, and he was convinced. And I was like, it can't be Mac. That doesn't make sense. You don't trade up to number 3 for Mac Jones. It can't be Mac Jones. And he's like, man, I think that's what's going to happen, man. I think you got to realize it. But it was like, there was enough of, you know what, that could be Shanahan's guy. I could totally see that happening. And I think that's what really freaked me out and freaked out a lot of 49ers fans. And there was enough truth and enough believability in the Mac Jones at 3 thing that you could believe it, even though it didn't make any sense at all. It made zero sense. And still to this day, the the Justin Fields stuff doesn't make sense because it seems more and more that he wasn't even in consideration. And Justin Fields was the only quarterback that Kyle Shanahan had ever met when they made the trade. So he must have really not liked him as a teenager at the quarterback collective, right? Because that was the only one he met and he didn't like him.
Well, the way that he kind of talked about it was that Fields was just a kid there at the camp, more so than them having real interaction at the camp. That's kind of how he made it sound. Like they like it wasn't like he developed any type of relationship with this 17-year-old kid.
Yeah, actually, John has a good point here in the chat. He says Sims still pushing Mac. I think that was the funniest part of all of it because Kyle's best friend, he's got Chris Sims' name tattooed on his ankle, and I think Sims had Trey Lance as quarterback 6, right? He had him as
5. Lance at 6, Fields at 5.
Lance at 6, Fields at 5. He had Mac Jones at 3. He had Wilson at 1 ahead of Lawrence. Then he had, I think
Mond.
I think he had Mond at, actually, he might have had Mond at 3. He had Mond at 3 or 4 ahead of both. Yeah, 4. And he had him ahead of both Fields and Lance. And so that was the hilarious part of all of it, is his best buddy had Lance as the worst, like this project. It's like, how could you, he wouldn't even take him in the first round. Like, how could you even consider taking him at 3? And that was the guy that Kyle liked the whole time. Maybe that liked the whole time. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever get the full story, but that's the player they moved up to number 3 to get. So this whole thing was insane. Chris Sims, his best buddy, his name is tattooed. Their names are tattooed on each other's ankles and they didn't know. I mean, it was amazing.
So this is how like things like that work. And I think what Chris Sims did is he kind of devalued the evolution of the mind, right? Like he's thinking about the conversations that they have had over the last, few years or the past few years. Maybe they had these conversations, 2-3 years ago. And like, I kind of equated it to like me and my buddies. If you guys before this draft would have asked my best friend, who all we do is sit around and talk football. That's all we do. If you would have asked him what type of quarterback I would want, it would not be Trey Lance. Like he would tell you that I would like more of the Mac Jones type quarterbacks because those are the conversations that we've had. But since then, my thought process on, the quarterbacks and what they look like and the quarterbacks that are coming into the NFL now, it has changed. Like these quarterbacks aren't just because they're mobile doesn't mean that they're not passers. And I think now more so than ever, you have these quarterbacks that are coming into the league. They just naturally do both. And I think Trey Lance is one of those guys. And I think Chris Sims kind of went a little hard on he doesn't want that type of quarterback for whatever reason. The Fields thing still doesn't make sense to me. But, I mean, even more so than, Fields and whatever, all these quarterbacks, they're just mobile. Now, they don't talk about Trevor Lawrence in that light. They don't talk about Zach Wilson in that light for whatever reason. But they're
Josh Allen back in the day too. They're super athletic, but
right.
They're good passers and they've got all this arm talent. But for some reason, and I think we know the reason, that someone like Justin Fields or even Trey Lance, it's like, oh, they're athletic, so they're a run first guy. And Justin Fields wasn't that like at all.
Right. Well, Trevor Lawrence probably ran more than Justin Fields.
And Trey Lance for sure did.
Yeah, definitely.
This is from Subtle Like at Rex. I don't even know how to say your name. I apologize, but he said called it last week. Super good duo. He's pumped for the Locked On Crocky, the Locked On 49ers with Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker. There's a few people that called it out, that saw it, and that was one of them. So shout out to all you guys, and that's why we had to go live to put this thing out there. We were going to wait one more day, but it was like, you know what? I think people are going to start figuring this thing out, that Eric Crocker's joining me on Locked On 49ers. So we got to go live with it. We got to make the announcement.
Yeah, and I actually had somebody comment on my YouTube page, and there was one person that was like, doing my detective work, I figured it out. It's Locked On 49ers, but congratulations, and I'll be listening. I'm like, damn, I didn't respond at all. I didn't like it or anything. I just kind of left it there, but I definitely saw that.
It was tough. It was tough keeping it quiet. Tony says, I used to listen to BP, but he got too negative, so I went to Striking Gold, and now I don't know what to do. Tony, I want to say, like, I have the same goal as you. I think I want the 49ers to be great. And if there's any negativity, it's just being real. It's not being negative. I want the team to be great. And so if they do something that I don't agree with, I'm going to call it out and I'm going to be real about it. And I'm going to play it straight down the middle. I'm not trying to be a homer. If you want the most homerific podcast, that Locked On 49ers definitely isn't for you. And I think Eric Crocker looks at things the same way. You look at it from an analyst's eye, and sometimes you got to critique it. Sometimes you're completely on board and you're a fan. That's just the way it goes. I think that's the only way to do it. For me, that is the only way I can do it naturally, and I can't really change how I look at the game.
Yeah, I actually, I feel like I'm a very optimistic person. I'm like a glass half full type person. So I always try to look at the positive in things. But, I have tweeted out some negative things in the sense of maybe some misses or just the thought process of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. And I had somebody kind of, I don't want to say attack me, but called me out for saying, oh, I used to follow you, but now I don't follow you because you're just negative. I'm like, well, I'm like the most positive person ever.
I'm super positive. And even when you're being negative, you're really good at being positive about what you're saying that's negative. But I think it's totally fair because nobody's perfect. Look at the NFL draft. Every team is going to miss on half of their picks. So if I critique the 49ers draft, for example, and look, I do the Shadow 49ers, and I think, Croc, that's probably be an episode coming up because I haven't really talked about the 2021 Shadow 49ers yet. But if you said every pick that a team made, your favorite team, said every single pick is awesome, they're going to hit, or if you said every single pick is going to be terrible, they completely screw up this draft, you'd be half right on both accounts. That's just the reality of the NFL. No teams are ever perfect. So there's always room for everybody to be critiqued. But I think sometimes some fans can get a little bit tunnel vision and they only know the 53 guys on the roster of the team they like and everybody else is trash. And I'm not into that, and that's not the way I analyze things. And so I hope when you listen to Locked On 49ers, not only you learn about the 49ers, but maybe you learn about some other teams in the league and maybe realize how things are coming together in the NFL, because obviously your favorite team isn't going to go undefeated every year. That's just not the way it is. Sometimes you do great things. Sometimes you do bad things. Sometimes you can do things better. And that's part of critiquing a team. And that's part of being honest about when you're watching the game.
Yeah, and my criticism of them wasn't so much that I think that they're, a bad head coach or GM combo. I actually think that John Lynch is pretty good. And there are a lot of things, I'd say most of the time, I can definitely see exactly where he was going with something or why he didn't make a certain decision. But I thought, when you kind of step back and you just like, okay, I'm looking at your first 4 years as a whole, and I look at the decisions that you guys have made, there were several opportunities to improve on the position, and you guys elected not to, for reasons that I understand. Like, I understand why you didn't, but at the end of the day, I don't make the decisions, you guys do. And now you have to go all in on a quarterback from North Dakota State because of past decisions that you guys have made. So it's not me attacking them in the sense of saying they don't know what they're doing. It's just, hey, these are the decisions that you guys have made, and overall, you're starting back from square one in year 5.
Oh, absolutely. And it's completely fair. I do want to shout out Peter. He says Locked On 49ers was already the best 49ers podcast before Crocker joining. Crocker joining Locked On 49ers is like Deion Sanders joining the 49ers in 1994. I love that.
I like it. I love it.
You got to bust out the neckband, though.
You know what? And I got to speak on Deion Sanders and the 94 team. I just saw this thing where it was like the top 10 49ers, greatest 49ers ever. And I know it was only for 1 year, but how do you not include Deion Sanders in the top 10 49 of all time? We're talking about somebody who, yes, 1 year, he came to help win the Super Bowl and get over that hump, getting your butt kicked by Dallas every year. They won the Super Bowl. He was defensive MVP, like an entire league. Like, he was defensive MVP. He had like 6 interceptions, ran 3 back for touchdowns, like had multiple interceptions in the playoffs. And I get it. He doesn't have like this long, illustrious 49ers career, but his impact in that 1 year, that's the last time the 49ers won a Super Bowl. So how do you not include him in somebody that was so impactful, even if it was only for 1 year?
It's hard. It's almost like there's two different questions, because who were the best 49ers while they wore the uniform? Then Deion Sanders would be up there. But who are the best all-time 49ers? Does one season of amazing play stack up against somebody like Roger Craig, who's not even a Hall of Famer, who was a 49er for a long time and put up many really good seasons, So I think that's the tough part of it, is when you're talking about an all-time list of a guy who played 1 year. Like, would Deion Sanders be a Hall of Famer if he only played 1 year in the NFL? It was the 94 season with the 49ers. He came in the league. That was his rookie year. And he said, peace, I'm out. It doesn't get better than that. He bailed. Would he be a Hall of Famer? You know, it's hard. and there's the opposite argument about Frank Gore. Like, it's just all about longevity, and he's just a stat collector over time, but he never peaked high enough to be a Hall of Famer. So I bet you would push back on that idea as well, right? And those are completely opposite careers when you talk about their career as a 49er.
Yeah, okay. So I can see it from that standpoint. I disagree, but I can see
it. You can't argue how great Deion was. Like, probably the best cornerback season of all time, right?
Right. I mean, that it was an amazing year, and just what he brought to the 49ers. And again, I mean, the Dallas Cowboys were kind of bullying the 49ers for a few years there. And it was like getting over that hump. Like, that NFC Championship was the Super Bowl.
It's hard because that whole team, it felt like a mercenary squad. Like, for me, even the first teams I watched, like the Super Bowl teams, 88, 89, and even some of the more recent teams that didn't win the Super Bowl, but were really good teams that played in the Super Bowl. The 94 team, it didn't feel organic. It didn't feel homegrown. And I think when people make lists of the best all-time 49ers team, I think the 94 team would crush all the other 49ers teams. But sometimes they're not put up at number one because it didn't feel organic. And it was more of a mercenary vibe of guys coming in for a short term just to win it. And I completely understand that too. And my favorite team isn't 94, but if I had to bet on which team was the best, I think the 49ers in 94 would just crush everybody.
Yeah, I mean, on every level, they were so good. Even like defensive line, didn't they have like Stubblefield and BY?
Stubblefield and BY was getting double teamed, so Stubblefield ended up being, I think, Defensive Player of the Year that year, wasn't he? Because
Deion was that year.
Oh no, yeah, it was Deion. That's right. Stubblefield got it like the next year.
Yeah, it was either the next year or the year after that.
The year after, that's right. Yeah, because everyone's like, Stubblefield's good, but we're still going to double team BY. Bryant Young, dude, Bryant Young before that injury, before his leg got folded in half back the wrong direction, that guy was like, I know it's blasphemy, and young folks that are watching Aaron Donald right now will get mad at this. BY was at that Aaron. He was the Aaron Donald of that mid-90s before that injury. He was that good. He was so disruptive, so strong, so athletic from the interior. But and he was still good after it. He played for a long time. I actually looked at his career numbers recently, and I was surprised how long he played. He played for a while after that injury, but he wasn't quite the same. He was a legit freak. He was so good. Like, that's one of the best draft picks the 49ers ever made was Bryant Young. He doesn't get talked about with, Montana and Young and Rice and Terrell Owens and all those guys.
Well, defensive tackle is just not like the sexy thing. Yeah. And I think over time that it kind of, just the legend of BY kind of gets just diminished a little bit because he's not playing the sexy position. But, I'm pretty sure guys that were on those teams understand just how important he was, and not just for, what he did, but how maybe he freed up things for the guys at the second level and, guys that were rushing off of the edges. So, yeah, they know how important he is, but he definitely is a guy that I feel like is overlooked. I never hear his name talked about in like the greats of the 49ers, not as much as other guys, at least. I mean, I think I hear, you talked about like Roger Craig. I hear people talk about Roger Craig more than they do Bryant Young.
Yeah, or Tom Rathman. He's a stinking fullback.
Or Rathman.
Thirdly, he gets talked about that way because he's that great. And that's what's awesome about the 49ers. And that's why I feel lucky to, first of all, have grown up in California, became a 49er, and get to host a show like Locked On 49ers. Like, I get to talk about one of the historic franchises in the NFL. And now I get to talk about one of the historic franchises in the NFL with Eric Crocker every day. So I feel really lucky, and we're global. There's comments here from Martin in Argentina. Like, that's amazing. There's people that hit me up all the time from Brazil and Mexico and Australia and in the UK. And it's so phenomenal. And it's really cool to be able to talk about a team every day that's got that kind of a global audience. Like, it matters. It's impactful to people. So I love these conversations, and I love hosting the show. And I'm so glad, Eric, that you're coming along on the ride now with me on Locked On 49ers, and we get to do this every day because this is super easy. We've been on here for an hour, right? And it feels like nothing. Like we get to do this every day and talk Niners. This is great.
Yeah, and I want to encourage everyone, if you're not already, make sure you guys go search up on the Apple podcast, on Spotify, whatever you guys listen to, your podcast and everything. Locked On 49ers, and I'll be on there daily now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm pumped. I mean, we can keep this going. Should we keep the Q&A part of this going? I think the actual Locked On 49ers podcast part is done now, but I'm down to keep this thing going if the folks are still out there and still watching on the Croc Talk TV.
Yeah, I mean, I see we have a good amount of people in here right now, and there was somebody. No, not. I don't know about that one. There was another question. Where is it at? Right here. Marquez Pope, top 10.
I loved Marquez Pope, man. Yeah,
he was a good football player.
Fresno State, right? Was Marquez Pope from Fresno State?
Was he? I don't know about him being from Fresno State. Nah, I don't think Fresno State.
Yeah, Fresno State.
What?
Fresno State.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
He was number 23 on the Niners, right?
Yeah, he would pop people, man.
Yeah, so there's Marquez Pope. There was there was like this string, like this era of 49er cornerbacks where it's like they just kind of couldn't get it right all the way. They had guys that played hard. There was like Darnell Walker, Antonio Langham, R.W. McQuarters.
R.W. McQuarters, yeah, that was like, let's draft a corner, but it turns out he's actually a kick returner. He's not really much of a corner at all.
Yeah.
That was a weird era for the 49ers because you get spoiled, and Bill Walsh was just a genius. And they made so many great personnel moves because I'm not a trade up guy at all when it comes to the draft. And that's one of the things that people get mad at me about. Whenever the 49ers trade up, I'm like, did you really need to trade up for Dante Pettis when there's Michael Gallup still there, when there's DJ Chark still there? Why are you trading up for Dante Pettis? And people get mad at me about it. But one of the greatest trade ups in NFL history all time was Bill Walsh trading up in the first round to draft Jerry Rice out of Mississippi Valley State. Imagine if Bill Walsh didn't trade up to draft Jerry Rice and that career happened in a Dallas Cowboys uniform, because that's what would happen if Bill Walsh didn't trade up to draft Jerry Rice to the 49ers. It would have been a Dallas Cowboy. Think about that. Yeah. So it's not 100%. Like not every trade up is bad. I want to say that right now.
But you're thinking about the value aspect of it.
Right. Yeah. So like essentially, like when it comes to the Trey Lance trade, 99 times out of 100, the Miami Dolphins won that trade because of what they got in trade moving back and the hit rate of quarterbacks. And Trey Lance, first of all, is a unicorn. There is literally zero track record. Zero players have ever been successful with Trey Lance's background, playing college ball for 1 year as a starter at the FCS level. And the year that he played was not this past season. It was the year before that. That's just flat out never happened. It's been 40 years since a player's been drafted in the first round that's attempted that few passes, 318, 317 career pass attempts in college for Trey Lance. And so it's just never happened. So you're trading up to number 3, giving up 2 future first round picks on top of your number 12 pick this year to go up to draft a guy that literally there's zero track record of success of that ever happening. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And I love Trey Lance. He's got so much talent, but if you're just playing the odds are not great for the 49ers getting value back on that trade up.
I will say the one thing that the 49ers kind of have going for them when it comes to drafting Trey Lance, if you kind of want to put a more positive spin on it, is the fact that first-round quarterbacks from FCS schools have been very successful. So there's only been 5, but all 5 have done very well.
You have to be at a certain level to even get considered to be a first-round pick as a quarterback out of an FCS school. Yeah, and Jimmy G was an FCS quarterback too. And even being a second-round pick was like, okay, this guy's legit to even be picked in the second round. And talking about swag, how about, this is one of my favorite things I ever saw from Trey Lance was at the North Dakota State Pro Day with the T-shirts that said QBU. I think that was an awesome flex. Did you like that?
Oh, I loved it. Just because of probably what it meant for him, like being at that school that had, a quarterback like Easton Stick, before him, who was a 5th-round draft pick, and then obviously Carson Wentz. And I kind of talked about Carson Wentz a little bit on Croc Talk TV on the podcast the other day. I think the way that he's viewed right now is really just this like super negative light. But the Carson Wentz that we watched early on was like a top 7. I want to say it was almost unanimous that he was like a top 7, top 8 quarterback in the NFL. And the people look at it now and it's like, oh, well, he failed. Like that trade up to draft Wentz didn't work. And it's like, well, yeah, it didn't work because of maybe some other issues that maybe they have like internally in that organization. But it wasn't because of lack of talent or ability, because we saw him play at extremely high levels. Now, I'm not saying Trey Lance is going to play at that level. Obviously, we hope he does. But, watching what Wentz did early on, with a team that was kind of trying to get back on track after the whole Chip Kelly debacle, there was a lot of positives. And at some point, and I don't know why, it just kind of fell off the railroad tracks.
I feel like Wentz is getting a little bit of a raw deal, and seeing him back with Frank Reich is going to be extremely interesting this year. Someone down here talked about Wentz and McNair, and I think Steve McNair is one of the best comps for Trey Lance that there is. Another FCS guy. I think that's a fantastic comp for Trey Lance, and there's just so many outcomes for Trey Lance too, which is both exciting and scary as hell at the same time, right? Because he could be anything. I have no idea what Trey Lance is going to be. He could be amazing. He could be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He could be really good, but maybe not quite as good as, say, Mac Jones or Justin Fields, both getting great reports in OTAs, right? And if I'll put that question to you, Croc. If Trey Lance is really good, but not as good as Mac Jones or Justin Fields, like, how do you think that will be taken by 49ers fans? Like, how does that end for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch when you look back at their careers as front office people? And does it really hurt them if they don't both get a star player in Trey Lance and have the best quarterback as compared to the guys they could have taken? Because I think that they've maybe painted themselves into a corner a little bit with this move. Is they almost have to get it right, or else this will haunt them for their entire careers.
Yeah, before I answer the question, I want to say shout out to 49ers First Take with the contribution. Really appreciate it. He said, holy crap, we don't deserve this. 2 of the best out. We appreciate that. And obviously, we're both really excited to, be doing this together now. When it comes to Trey Lance and kind of what he means really for John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, I mean, this is it. But I think it was going to be it regardless of who they draft. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, like, which guy they chose. It's just, did you choose the right guy? And I think they felt like everything that they knew about Trey Lance led them to believe that he was the right guy. You threw out some names of guys that, he reminds you of. There are a couple other guys that have been, names have been thrown out. One guy, Dak Prescott. And I think, you probably look at Dak Prescott and it's like, okay, but he's been good. And people probably forget this, but his rookie year, Cowboys went 13-3. He actually pretty much was 13-2 as a starter. He only played 1 possession in that last game and actually led them down to a touchdown before Tony Romo took over. But they kept everything fairly simple for him, and easy reads and things like that. I think by nature he is more of a Dak Prescott, where he's a little conservative with the way that he plays. At least what we've seen so far with. As a 19-year-old kid, Trey Lance when he played.
Yeah,
but
and part of that is the North Dakota State offense, but part of that I think is why because one of the first things I said when I saw Trey Lance play is like, oh, I think Kyle Shanahan's going to like this. I think Kyle Shanahan can see this in his offense, and I think that I don't think that was the end all for Kyle Shanahan. But I think that helped Kyle Shanahan say, like, dude, I can picture this in my offense, but now I'm getting 6'4", 225 with a cannon arm and all this athleticism on top of it.
Well, and then the other name, somebody, an OG, was actually in my mentions or comments on YouTube, and he threw out the name Cordell Stewart. And that's not a name that we've really thought about. I don't think I've ever heard anybody mention Trey Lance and Cordell Stewart in the same light, but I could see maybe, and I don't remember Cordell Stewart just coming right out. I remember him more. I remember him playing receiver. I remember him that whole transition of back and forth. Like I remember that, but I couldn't tell you like an evaluation of maybe what Slash's issues were, right? If he was not maybe the best pure passer, but wanted to run, and I couldn't tell you the evaluation of him. But I remember watching him play, and I just remember thinking Cordell Stewart's a good quarterback. Like not great, but he was good. So I think even if you were to get that type of quarterbacking from a Trey Lance, Kyle Shanahan, we've seen him do well with a little bit less, So
Right.
I think that plays a part in it as well, who the puppet master actually is.
And it's entirely possible that this entire Kyle Shanahan regime, since he's been in San Francisco, we really haven't seen him with a quarterback who's actually top half NFL, even though Jimmy Garoppolo at times has played there, and you could put him in, the 12 to 15 range as far as the best quarterbacks in the NFL, the best starters. Kyle Shanahan might be potentially artificially pushing Jimmy G up there. And we've seen Nick Mullins have some success. And right now, he's barely a QB3 for most rosters in the NFL. CJ Beathard, same thing, So I don't know if we've actually seen a 49ers offense under Kyle Shanahan with the talent of someone who could really deliver like that Matt Ryan season. And Matt Ryan has never had the success he's had under anybody else that he had under Kyle Shanahan. So like we legitimately might have seen Jimmy Garoppolo easily the best quarterback since 2017 for the 49ers, but maybe he's like high-end backup. Maybe he's playing better than he should because he's playing under Shanahan. What if you gave him that legitimate top 10 talent in the NFL and watch that happen? I think that's the exciting part for watching somebody like Trey Lance, watching him get to mold under Kyle Shanahan, and he can turn that into whatever he wants. And so we get to find out what kind of a football coach Kyle Shanahan is with this type of a prospect in Trey Lance.
I think that's the part that a lot of people don't truly understand, right? We see Jimmy Garoppolo, and we understand that Jimmy Garoppolo starting has led to a bunch of wins. But I don't think people understand or look at how the 49ers win when they have Jimmy Garoppolo. It's not so much that it's Jimmy Garoppolo going out there just slinging the ball around and winning games. I think Jimmy Garoppolo does things well enough to where Kyle Shanahan can put together a game plan based on Garoppolo's strengths and win games that way. But it's not because Garoppolo is just the most talented quarterback on the field. And it doesn't, the most talented quarterback doesn't always win, right? But if you can get the most talented quarterback to kind of buy in and understand how you want him to win, and he's able to kind of execute the game in that way, that's when you see special. So not to compare Trey Lance to guys like Josh Allen, because we know that's thrown out there a lot, but Josh Allen wasn't the best, most pure drop back passer when he came into the league. You watched Josh Allen last year, and I want to say, was it the playoff game where, they threw the ball like 20 straight times in the playoffs, with Josh Allen. And that's not how people kind of view Josh Allen coming out. So again, I'm not saying that that's what Trey Lance is going to be, but just in the sense of, the developing part, the talent, being able to kind of take over and being able to execute. I think that's what the hope is for Trey Lance, that he can become somebody that executes. And if he can execute a game plan with his physical capabilities, then sky's the limit. And I think that's what you hope for when you trade up to number 3 for a guy with that type of talent.
Yeah, Tony says Slash also punted. Yeah, that can't be forgotten. I haven't seen Taysom Hill punt yet. I don't know if you have, but I like Cordell Stewart. That was a one of a kind situation. It'd be really cool to see him in the NFL now as a rookie and see how he would get treated versus how that happened then. Somebody said Jay Cutler. I don't know if I like that comp. Cutler probably doesn't get the credit for what kind of an arm he had when he came into the league, and he was pretty athletic as well. He gets more of the conversations are about
who traded up for Jay Cutler.
Who was in? I don't know. Who was in charge then?
The Broncos traded up to get Jay Cutler.
Yeah, John Elway, but
no.
Well, that was pre Elway.
Well, who was the coach?
Oh, Mike Shanahan. Yeah,
Mike Shanahan. Yeah.
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 That'd be fun to hear what Mike Shanahan's had to say about all this.
I know. I mean, we were kind of, myself, Rob, people on our feed were kind of like, is Mike Shanahan, is he the leak? Like, is he the guy that's leaking all this information to the press?
Yeah, I thought he was the leak. And here's the thing, maybe he was, but he didn't really know. And I think a lot of people around the 49ers, they all assumed that, like, and that's where there was like that little nugget of that little just crumb of believability about Mac Jones.
Yeah.
And I think people on the staff. How about this, Croc? How about if you were one of the higher up scouts, or you're Adam Peters, or you're the owner, you're freaking Jed York, and you don't know who your team just traded up to get, and you okay them giving up 2 first-round picks, and they didn't tell him till the week of the draft who they were picking. That's kind of crazy. Like, because 49ers get so much credit, like, oh, no leaks in the building. Good job. You had everybody making the wrong reports. Like, that doesn't matter. Get the pick right. But also, do you just do you piss off your entire building by not letting people feel like they're part of the process? Like, imagine if your assistant GM, Adam Peters, and you liked a different player, or maybe you liked Trey Lance the whole time, but they wouldn't tell you who they're going to take because they don't want any leaks. Like, imagine being that high up in the building and not knowing. You're the CEO, you're the owner of the freaking team. You don't know who the 49ers are going to draft. They're like, hey, I think we like some guys. Let's trade up all of your future draft picks. I think that's why that type of move is so rare, because ownership's like, no, you can't have the 2023 rounder. Go trade up if you want, but you can't have 2023 draft picks. We don't do that here, So I think part of it, maybe I can only I just know if I was Adam Peters and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are doing this in secret, and they decide to trade up, and I'm like, it wasn't a good idea. And they're like, and I don't know who they're going to pick. I'm like on the phone, like waiting to send my resume out to teams and be like, dude, let me be in charge, because that would completely piss me off. I wonder if there's some of that in the building where they're like, dude, tell me who you're going to pick. Like, this is insane that we don't even know what's going on in our own building. Maybe our voices aren't even being heard because Kyle Shanahan watched film for an hour in January and decided who he's going to pick.
Well, the way that they kind of described it playing out is that they did involve everyone, but Kyle did not want to push his influence on the talent evaluators. So, and I can understand that, right? Like, it's something that you probably just kind of naturally do if the person that's in charge of everything says, well, I like this guy. And then you probably watch the film with his eyes, trying to figure out what he likes about him. And they're like, oh, okay, I see why he likes him. I see, okay, oh yeah. And then you come back, well, yeah, I really like Trey Lance, but I think he wanted it to be more natural with their, analysis and observations of what they were seeing. So it was, hey, don't worry about who it is that I like. Let's have these conversations. Let's have the open, conversations about the guys you like, why you like this guy, and we'll come to a conclusion from there with everyone's input. And ultimately, I mean, they know who the decision maker was, but I do feel like although he didn't tell people who the pick was, I think he did a good job of kind of valuing their input.
Yeah, it's hard because they've kind of talked both sides of that, because if you hear them, like Kyle and John kind of decided who they liked already. Like, they could have listened, but I don't know if that had any influence. That's a big question, because they've said that they've went through this whole process and that they valued everybody's opinion, but they also said that they knew who they liked because Kyle sent him some video at 2 a.m. when he was on vacation in January, which is obviously very early in the process. So how much did any of those other ideas actually seep in, or how much did they matter? So I don't know. It's a good question. And I know that happens all the time in the NFL, disgruntled scouts, because they feel like they're not part of the process. They feel like their voices aren't heard. And actually, I have a question for you when it comes to being a scout in the NFL. Was there a question you wanted to go to there?
Well, I just kind of wanted to answer this. My guy, Roland Croman, I know, we have our communication on Twitter as well. He says, I want to see Garoppolo with the full offensive talent. We haven't seen Jimmy with the true number one wide receiver. I would say we haven't seen him with a true number one wide receiver, but we've seen him with a true number one option, and that's George Kittle. And even with George Kittle, they've done some things extremely well, some other things where, he threw a screen too high and blew out George Kittle's knee. So, Jimmy Garoppolo, I think he kind of is what he is. I think he's a really good executor of the offense that Kyle Shanahan has created specifically for him. but I don't know how much that would change because he gets a better receiver on the outside. I think he kind of is what he is, and his strengths are kind of throwing a little bit more over the rhythm, over the middle with rhythm and timing, and and I think his ability is based more on that than necessarily just the most talented receiver, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I wonder how much of the personnel decisions have been based on what they think can be utilized in the offense, because Kyle Shanahan has continually drafted and brought in players who are more the slot type catch and run players, run after catch guys, and Ayuk is that, and Debo is that, and Kittle is that. If they had DK Metcalf on the outside, I know you and I both loved DK Metcalf in 2019. If they had DK Metcalf, would he even be utilized? Because it's not like Jimmy Garoppolo throws the deep ball as well as Russell Wilson. So what would that look like in the 49ers offense? Would that help Jimmy Garoppolo in the offense to have something different? Or has Kyle Shanahan avoided those types of players because he doesn't think that Jimmy Garoppolo can utilize them? So that's a good question.
Right. That's a good question. And I think with the deep ball, there are certain things, right? I talked to my quarterback guy, and he'll tell me a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo's issues throwing the deep ball is because it starts with his feet. And I mean, he can go really in depth with that. I won't try to mess up exactly what he told me with Jimmy throwing the deep ball, but I think some of it has to do as well with just the confidence. The confidence in throwing the ball and knowing that maybe this guy is going to make a play for you. And we haven't really, maybe that's what Jimmy Garoppolo is missing, a guy that he feels comfortable. If I just throw it out there, this guy's going to make a play, and I don't have to be perfect with the ball location. So I'm just kind of trying to play a little devil's advocate with maybe why we haven't seen the downfield shots with him. I would say, I mean, just overall, there's just been a huge lack of opportunity when it comes to throwing the ball downfield with whoever the 49ers have had on offense, even a speedster like Marquise Goodwin. They kind of turned him into a pure like possession receiver when Jimmy Garoppolo took over. And the times that he did throw the ball downfield with Goodwin, it wasn't pretty. It was kind of ugly outside of one preseason throw to him against what was it? It was against Houston Texans. It was a preseason throw, beautiful ball down the left sideline. And outside of that, it was kind of ugly with their whole connection.
Yeah, and but that's part of it too, because Goodwin was fast, but I don't think anybody would put Goodwin in the upper echelon of like outside wide receivers in the NFL. Ability to get deep. The best route Goodwin ran, or at least the best route that they connected on, was the dig route. I think it was because his speed, maybe DBs like respected his speed a little bit. I feel like Garoppolo and Goodwin had a really nice connection on those dig routes, but again, that's over the middle of the field, inside the numbers, and that's kind of what Garoppolo's thing has been. So it's like a chicken or the egg argument. Is it the receivers? Is it Shanahan's play calling? Or is it Garoppolo himself? But I will say, mechanically, the way Garoppolo throws too, it's his best attribute is how quickly he can snap the ball off. I've never seen him. I never saw a quarterback. I remember watching him in 2014 before the draft, and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen a quarterback get rid of the ball this quickly, snap those throws off so fast. But it's because it's all upper body, and it's just like he's locked in lower body, and he just snaps off the upper body. So could he get better? Could he still have such a quick release and then get better throwing the ball down the field? Like your guy said, if he worked on those mechanics and kind of do a little bit of both, or is it because he throws the way he throws is the way he's able to snap off those throws so quickly, but it also hinders some of his other abilities at the same time? So yeah, a lot of chicken or the egg arguments when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo as quarterback of the 49ers.
What do you think of, or take away from, the word about, Mac Jones killing it out in New England?
I'm kind of not surprised. You know what's funny is I keep hearing John Lynch talk about Mac Jones, about how his tape was nearly flawless. And I think there's something to the Mac Jones talk. I don't know if they liked him more or anything like that, but I know they liked him enough that people inside the building who were leaking information to Adam Schefter or whoever, they knew the 49ers liked Mac Jones. And I think there's an alternate reality where the 49ers could have ended up with Mac Jones maybe in the draft, and it's probably not them trading up to 3, but staying at 12 and drafting Mac Jones. I don't know how 49ers would 49ers fans would feel about that if you had your 2 first rounders and a third back that you traded up and you drafted Mac Jones at 12 instead of Trey Lance. But when you hear John Lynch talk about Mac Jones, he talks about how almost nearly flawless that film was. And he never says really much about Justin Fields, but it sounds like there was enough, whether it was coming from Shanahan, coming from Lynch, coming from the rest of the scouting department, I'm not sure, but there was some love for Mac Jones. But it's not surprising that he's looking good in OTAs. And Justin Fields, same treatment. Everyone's talking about how good he looks, especially compared to what Mitch Trubisky looked like. I saw a report the other day where a reporter was like, literally the first thing I said about Mitch Trubisky his first day in practice was he was fumbling snaps and he couldn't even function during practice. And Justin Fields is just a completely different beast and looks amazing in comparison. And I mean, part of it is fluff, and I don't think you can really take anything from OTAs anyway. And I said this on the podcast recently, the most important thing Trey Lance could do, I don't care if he's bouncing passes, I don't care if he's floating passes over people's heads, acting like he belongs, his mindset, knowing that it's not too big for him, I think is the most important part for a 21-year-old to come in and actually act like he's competing and have the right mindset. I think that's the most important thing you can take from OTAs. Now, when it comes to the preseason and we see him and we're actually watching him produce and we're like, okay, he was, 12 to 15 passing. Did he throw any interceptions? Is he fumbling the ball? Does he look functional in the offense? When you see him when live bullets and people are trying to actually hit him and they have pads on, then you have to make some declarations about a player. But OTAs in shorts, I don't think there's anything you can take out of it except for their mindset coming in. Does it look too big for him? Are things moving too quickly? Does he look like he's ready to compete? And I think he passed that test based on what I've seen and what I've heard from both players and reporters that were there at practice.
Yeah, and I think in terms of Mac Jones, him doing well in 7-on-7, things like that's to be expected. I think what we knew of him is that he is that executor of an offense and he is that, drop back passer and he can do those things. I think the reason why you go in the opposite direction is just because you want to be able to do more with your offense, being able to utilize your quarterback in the run game to some extent. And, now you have got a guy with, just a bigger arm, because that's one thing that maybe might not show up so much in 7-on-7 just yet, but in the games when you have that pass rush and now you can't really step into throws, how do those balls still kind of get downfield? Or do you have to develop more of a Jimmy Garoppolo style offense where everything is a little bit more intermediate, or it has to be intermediate, and you can't throw those deep outs, far out throws? Remember, going from college to the NFL, one thing that a lot of people kind of overlook in that whole transition is the fact that in college, the field is really wider because of the far hashes. So there's way more space. So if you don't have that big rocket arm, it doesn't show up as much in college because the spacing is much better. In the NFL, the field starts to be a little bit more condensed. Now, some of those flaws can potentially show up, especially trying to get the ball down the field. So I think we know what Mac Jones is. And I said it, you said it when we were talking about it on the podcast, kind of, beforehand. We're talking about Trey Lance and those guys, but I liked Mac Jones. I just didn't like Mac Jones at 3.
You just don't take him at 3, but he's a guy that you could absolutely see. Very Kirk Cousins-like. And that's why there was a believability that Kyle Shanahan would like him, but he's not a player you would trade up to 3 to get. And like in a paint-by-numbers situation where things are very simplified, in an OTA where it's like, can Mac Jones understand some simple concepts and know where to throw the ball? Yeah, of course. I'm not surprised at all. He looks okay, but those kind of reports mean nothing right now. We'll see what he looks like when actual live bullets are flying, and can he drive passes in when he needs to, and can he elevate an offense, or is he just going to be an executor and be just as good as whatever's around him, coaching and receiver wise? And it's just really hard with that Alabama offense because he had the best offensive line. He had 2 top 10 wide receivers, and he threw more screens than anybody else. You talk about all that space, throwing screens to that wide hash out there. And it's just so much that Mac Jones, to be honest, I feel like Mac Jones was the easiest evaluation, right? Because it was like obvious what he could do and what he couldn't do. And I think that was the perfect spot for him. Middle of the first round, 15 overall to the Patriots. fantastic. Makes perfect sense. Number 3 overall, trading all these picks to go up and get him at number 3. That makes zero sense.
Yeah, well, we got my guy Roland Chrome. He says he just believes that if you identify a guy and you want to get him, no matter where that guy is, you go get him. But I do think that there is a value on every player, right? Like, George Kittle. They could have really liked George Kittle and said, hey, this is a nice size tight end who ran a 4.5 and he's extremely athletic. Look at his 3-cone is off the charts. Like, this tight end fits our offense to a T. But you were never going to draft him where Evan Ingram got drafted, because you knew that's not what the value of George Kittle was. He was always going to be more so of a 4th or 5th round pick. And, based on what they knew of him coming out of college and even taking his athleticism into consideration. So I think you always have to kind of take into consideration the value of that specific prospect. And, where do guys like Mac Jones go? I heard John Middlecoff and those guys kind of discussing that whole thing, and they're like, quarterbacks right now are kind of being pushed up a little bit higher than they have traditionally. If Derek Carr coming out of Fresno State was in this draft where he had went higher, because Derek Carr was, he was balling at Fresno State, putting up crazy numbers, and he was athletic enough. He has good enough arm. Like, all those things were actually better than Mac Jones, but obviously he's not playing at Alabama. Where would Derek Carr go if he were in this class, in this era of time where the numbers are crazy and all that? Like, he probably would have been a higher draft pick than even Mac Jones. Mac Jones, where Mac Jones went was not by accident. And I've heard you and other people, it still might be a little high taking him at 15.
My original thought was like, I thought maybe the Saints at 28 was like the highest he could go. I thought he was going to be like that. I thought he was going to be in the Andy Dalton range, like early 2nd round guy, maybe sneaks into round 1. And when people started talking about him even at 12 for the 49ers, like, no way. And I think it was Michael Lombardi or somebody was like, oh, his floor is pick 8. And I thought
that was Tannenbaum.
Oh, Tannenbaum. Yeah, I always get Lombardi and Tannenbaum mixed up. Michael Tannenbaum was the one who said that. And it was like, you're out of your damn mind. Are you kidding me? And then from then on, all the reports were like, Mac Jones is going to go high. And then Niners trade up to 3. He's like, oh my God, did they trade up to number 3 for Mac Jones? And it just like, it was that snowball that kept rolling. But in reality, yeah, he was sort of a mid-late 1st round guy. And who knows, maybe he even went too high. But I won't be surprised if he's a good NFL quarterback, but I will be surprised if he's a great NFL quarterback. By the way, Derek Carr, Fresno State, was thrown to Devontae Adams. So he had some weapons there. Now, looking back, we know that, we know who the star was of that offense.
Well, and there wasn't just Devontae Adams. There were 4 receivers that all went to the NFL or had opportunities in the NFL. So you did have Devontae Adams. You also had Jalen Saunders, who ended up being a 4th round pick. You also had Isaiah Burse, who was an undrafted guy, but spent a couple years with the Broncos. And you had Josh Harper, who ended up breaking all of Devontae Adams' records. He was with the Raiders for a little bit. So there were four receivers in that offense that all guys had, were on, rosters of the NFL at one point or another.
Greatest Fresno State wide receiver of all time, though, Bernard Berrien.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite. Yeah. Not the greatest, but my favorite.
I was really big. I actually lived in Fresno at that time. So yeah, Bernard Berrien, and you had Rodney Wright.
Yes. Rodney Wright. That was a great squad. That was like, I knew people on that team.
Oh yeah. I mean, they were top 10 in the nation.
The best players from my high school and growing up in Visalia, California, like they were like, that's where you achieved to go, was Fresno State. And I had, I knew a lot of people on that Fresno State squad.
Yeah, no, Pat Hill had them kicking butt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were playing good. And I mean, he was a guy that was like, we'll play anybody, anywhere, anytime. And okay, we need to travel across the country to go play you. Okay, we'll do that.
Absolutely. That was a fun team. I love those Fresno State teams. I was never a huge Fresno State fan like a lot of people were growing up, but that team, I was like, yeah, okay. I know people on the team that they're like overachieving. They're the giant killers. I love those type of smaller school teams that go up against the big boys.
Yeah, so I think it's time to wrap this up, man. We've been on here for an hour and a half now, Brian. I appreciate you coming on for this hour and a half time. I'm a part of Locked On 49ers now. I'm really excited about that. I hope you guys are too. Got a lot of good positive feedback in the comments, in the mentions, and everybody kind of excited to see this dynamic duo. I know I'm really excited to be on here talking 49er football 5 days a week. It's pretty cool.
Eric Crocker, always around the football at that time, made a great catch.
We hear that drop many times on Locked On 49ers. I'm pumped for it, Croc. I'm so excited for this new era of Locked On 49ers. Can't wait to talk Niners with you every single day on Locked On 49ers. For those of you out there who aren't subscribed, go wherever your favorite podcast app is, go subscribe. And also for those Locked On 49ers listeners that aren't subscribed yet to the new podcast feed for Croc Talk, you got to subscribe to that one and check out Croc Talk TV on YouTube. Right? I can't wait to see all your breakdowns, wide receivers and DBs and anything going on in the NFL. And dude, like, you are killing the game, Croc. You work your butt off, which I totally respect, and you're passionate about it. Like, and I love all of that. So give me more of that. Give it to me every day on Locked On 49ers. Can't wait.
Yes, sir. All right, y'all. Appreciate you guys coming on. We're out of here. Peace.